Welcome to Super Rant Season 1 Doomsday Preppers. Here we rewatch superhero movies to explore how they build towards bigger stories, starting with Avengers Doomsday and the MCU. Welcome to Super Rant. This is the show where we break down movies and talk about how they relate to future movies, starting with the MCU and Doomsday. As always, my name is Brian, and I'm happy to be here.
My name is Kevin. I'm a lead writer for Screen Rant, covering all things Star Wars, superheroes, and a whole lot more fun stuff.
Today, we are talking about Captain America Civil War.
That's right.
2016 movie that sees Iron Man and his crew face off against Cap and his. And yeah, this one I think is still I think this movie, while there's a Tony Cap debate, there's also a debate about like where this movie falls on rankings. Because some people, like I feel like people either really like this movie or they really don't like this movie.
Yeah, I agree.
So part of the podcast today is definitely going to be, arguing a little bit about the actual conflict in the movie. But we'll try not to dedicate too much time to that.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll get into the Doomsday bit, because I got some interesting things that I think are worth talking about.
Awesome.
But let's have at it for just 5 to 10 minutes. And Kevin, your stance has traditionally been Captain America's in the right.
Yep.
My stance is typically been Tony's in the right.
And I don't think we've wavered. I don't think we've wavered from that in the 10 years since this movie's came out. That's crazy to me too. No. Is that it? As of May 6th, it celebrated its 10th anniversary. That is wild to me.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, this movie came out when I was a senior in high school. I mean, I remember seeing the trailer with Spider-Man in it for the first time and just freaking out. And I remember being in one of my senior classes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So a couple ground rules. I think we'll stick purely to the MCU debate. We won't bring in the comic Civil War into this, because that conflict was wildly different.
Correct. Yeah.
I mean, like, there's some similar, like, arguments, but what actually happens and why things build up the way they are, very, very different.
Yeah, there's definitely some different dynamics. There's definitely some different dynamics at play with the comics.
Yeah, definitely. And so, let's stick to the movies. We'll try not to go longer than 10 minutes. But Kevin, opening argument. Have at it. Why is Cap in the right, do you think?
I think just right off the bat, he's in the right morally. He says at the very beginning, when they're all sitting around that table after Secretary Ross kind of lays down what the United Nations is thinking with the Sokovia Accords, he's saying, if we sign this, we surrender our right to choose. And he says, what if there's somewhere we need to go and they won't let us? Right? And he says, the safest hands are still our own. And I think it ties all the way to the ending where Steve leaves that voicemail for Tony, and he's like, I'll be there if you need me. But it kind of comes down to, he says, like, my faith has always been in individuals. And I think that's like a good crux of the argument, where what he doesn't believe in is institutions. Because agendas change, corruption happens, things get messy and compromised. And if you even just look at his own past experience, if you think about it, like, this is Captain America Civil War. Well, the previous movie, Winter Soldier, we're seeing S.H.I.E.L.D. completely compromised. Like, not partially, completely compromised with Hydra. And they were going to do Project Insight. And now, it's like preemptive murder on a global scale if Steve hadn't acted as an individual against the entire system. And, the few allies he had who chose to work with him. They made that choice to fight against an institution. And it comes down to the fact that institutions are never going to be reliable forever, because they're so fluid, because they change. And again, agendas, right? So, I mean, Tony's like,
So I mean, if I could interject,
yeah,
So I mean, I don't think Tony's point is that all institutions, all governments are good. I mean, we see in the first Avengers, he challenges Nick Fury pretty off the bat. But I mean, when we look at like any other military force or police or intelligence agencies, nuclear programs, anything like that, they like it all requires oversight, right? There are rules to how you can do those things. And Tony's line is, if we can't accept limitations, we're no better than the threats that we fight.
right,
And so that moral intent isn't enough. And he's not saying that governments are perfect. His actual argument is that some oversight is better than none.
yes,
And flawed institutions are still preferable to unchecked individuals. And so the Accords create that accountability because they are, huge, gigantic powers at play within the Avengers.
yes.
And, Steve's solution is effectively, trust us to do what we need to do. And no group this powerful should rely solely on self-trust. And we see, after Endgame, well, what happens when there isn't really any oversight? Well, we get things like Wanda, who go off the rails and end up holding a town captive, not intentionally. Her intentions were good, but she had this town underneath her absolute control.
Yes.
And she continued to let her needs determine what was going to happen next. And so morally, her agendas changed. What she was focused on changed, and you couldn't rely on her anymore. And that's true for other areas in the MCU as well, like the Eternals.
Right, sure. And let's just real quick, I think we can both agree that as far as where Steve and Tony both are coming from, it makes sense. Like, Tony is coming from
I think it makes sense. I think Cap's argument makes sense, but I think in terms of what is socially sustainable, Tony's in the right.
So, the thing that gets me is that Tony's coming from a very personal place when he comes to this decision, right?
Well, so does Cap. You mean
yes.
You just talked about S.H.I.E.L.D. and his whole experience with that.
Yes, but I mean, that's...
It's personal for all of them.
Right. What I'm saying specifically with Tony is that he is kind of for the first time, like, and this is something I just want to give to your argument with Tony, is like for the first time he's realizing that there are consequences to actions, to powers, and it all stems from like Ultron, right? And so he's faced with that mom and her son who died in Sokovia, and they had no idea, and he's taking that and he's agreeing with the Sokovia Accords because he believes they should all be put in check and oversight and the whole thing. And I think Steve agrees that unchecked power of the individual is dangerous, right? But I think what's just as dangerous, and this is where he's coming from, what's just as dangerous is governments who are then given control over individual superheroes, right? For instance, in the first Avengers...
Well, no. Hold on. In this context, this is specifically for the Avengers, is it not?
Yeah.
Because we know there are other heroes out there, like Spider-Man, that aren't a part of this. So
No. The Sokovia Accords were for all superhero individuals. We see that later in the MCU.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. But I think, yes, Tony is faced with that guilt, but I don't think his guilt invalidates the argument.
Oh no, I'm not. I don't think it invalidates it.
I think it strengthens it.
I think it's.
I think it strengthens it because he learns. Tony is. We've talked about this before in the podcast. Tony is constantly changing his approach to being a superhero, and so he learns from Ultron and from the beginning of this movie that power without strength is dangerous, and even intelligent, well-meaning people can make disastrous choices.
Yes, and I'm not saying his argument is invalid. I think he's coming from a position that makes sense.
I think Steve's flaw is that he assumes that his moral compass is sufficient justification for to do whatever he wants, which for him probably is the case because he is the most moral. You know, he can lift the hammer in Endgame. He is worthy. But that's not going to be true for every other individual out there. Tony realizes in this movie that your personal conviction is not enough by itself. There has to be some oversight because without that, they become, you know, the private superpowered force and no one can remove or regulate them. So let's say for instance that we get through Endgame and the Avengers had been together and everyone signed the Accords. Wanda, so not to bring this is I mean, not to harp on the Wanda argument, but it's a good argument.
Right, but
she
she's an
could have
individual.
received some actually
It's
right,
an
and
individual
because she
case.
wasn't being regulated, that's why Westview was able to happen. If she was, she might have received some actual counseling. And say, hey, if you're going to be allowed to operate as an individual with these powers, you have to have training. And we see that with police officers, right? If a police officer is in a shootout, they have to go through a round of court mandated therapy or training or whatever in order to be put back into action. But this large scale endgame event happens and all of these heroes are just able to do whatever they want again.
Sure. Can
as
I run
a
for
citizen, yes.
Okay.
Go ahead.
First Avengers movie. The Avengers are there on the scene. They are working to save the city from an alien invasion. What does the government decide to do? The World Security Council. They say, no, we're just going to send a nuke and we're going to blow up the entire city and kill a bunch of innocent people. Because in that moment,
right,
the government decision was to sacrifice as many as people who were in that city in order to save the world. And yet it was the Avengers as individuals who made the decision to protect and save the world and prevent a bunch of casualties. Now, that is a best case scenario. We see that there are worse scenarios, like with Wanda and Lagos at the beginning of Civil War, where incidents happen and there are crises that can shake the public faith, right? And that's what gets the government and the United Nations moving. But like, again, let's just say they all sign the Sokovia Accords, right? In this moment in Civil War, you have Wakanda, the US, the United Nations, and all those countries, and they're all agreeing here in this moment. But we see later on in the MCU that Wakanda, the US, different countries, they start conflicting with themselves. Like, think about like the governments fighting over vibranium, and later on like adamantium and different resources, and agendas change. So how does something like the Sokovia Accords even work when it's this United Nations panel and they're the ones who are going to decide when and where the Avengers can't operate? Like, what if the Avengers had needed UN approval to respond to Thanos? Like, that's not gonna work, right? It's
so okay, yes, but it's the responsibility of the citizen to challenge the government authority when they are making bad decisions. And so, right, Steve has a great point. The council might decide that we're going to use the Avengers in this way, politically this way.
Yeah.
But Tony's point is that the Avengers are already acting according to their personal judgment and bias. Tony himself created Ultron based on fear of what could happen. Steve hid information about Bucky from the rest of the team for his own personal bias. They're already doing things. The Avengers are already corrupt, and Civil War proves that.
Right. I mean, it's
Zemo
not
was able
about.
to do what he Zemo was able to do what he was able to do because he was able to see the cracks in the wall. There was no agreed upon authority structure. Personal loyalties already overrode any collective decision making.
Sure.
Emotional conflicts affected the missions. And so the team is already struggling with personal bias and selectivity.
Sure.
And so
That's an argument to
you
be.
need to have you need to have that oversight.
Right. And so that's an argument to be made 100%, but I think the argument goes bigger than the Avengers aren't. It's not the Avengers aren't perfect, so they need oversight. Like that, I don't think Steve is saying the Avengers are perfect. He's saying the safest hands are still our own, and yes, we make mistakes, but like, so Tony is saying we make mistakes and the government should control us, and Steve is saying governments make mistakes too, and they are just as corrupt, so the safest hands are still our own. It's not about being perfect and making the right calls every single time. You know what I mean?
Well, right, but Tony's stance isn't that governments are always right. His point, it's not that they're going to use us in the right way. It's that unchecked power is dangerous even when held by heroes.
Right. He's saying we've made mistakes, so we need oversight. But the oversight he's asking for comes from an institution that makes just as many mistakes, if not more so. So the government shouldn't be the oversight. Because if they're flawed and they
at
make
this
mistakes,
point in time, at this point in time in the movie, this is a new council, right? This is a new accord.
yes, but they're still made up by
This
governments
isn't
with
something.
history.
Okay, but you can't judge what this new thing is going to be based off of what's happened in the past.
Would you have
But
any
yes,
reason based
Secretary
on the past?
Ross.
Would you have any reason?
Secretary
to trust?
Ross.
Would you have any reason to
Secretary.
trust?
Because there's certain safeguards that they're going to put in place, and by signing the accords, Tony and Steve and whoever else get a foot in the door to voice their concerns and to challenge the authoritative rule. Whereas if they don't, by not signing the accords, it's going to happen with or without them anyways. Remember, this isn't something that Tony has decided, hey, this is my idea, this is going to happen.
No.
The governments have decided this is going to happen, whether you like it or not. And so the argument isn't
So
should it or should it
comply?
not be happening. No, that's not what I'm saying, not just comply, but it's going, by not signing the accords, you're putting it into their hands without giving any input. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean,
By signing
yes.
the accords, you get to then have a say, and your voice can be heard.
I mean, you would hope. I think that's maybe the best case, maybe a little bit naive hope that you can, make amends and that the panel actually listens to you.
And then if they don't,
But agendas change.
then it's the responsibility. Right, but it's the responsibility. A good government works when citizens challenge rule that is not being ruled well.
You're absolutely right. And that is certainly the hope. Like that's the optimistic viewpoint of how it should work. You're 100% right. And I think Steve has no reason, especially if you think about like how he's come into this present world, and I don't think he has any reason to trust that the best case scenarios and the way things should be morally are going to happen. He has no evidence to suggest otherwise.
Right.
And you think, and just
So let's start
examples real quick is the airport fight, right? Compliance is prioritized over solving the actual threat, which is Zemo and what he's doing, and he's already in Siberia, right? And what's more of the priority for Iron Man and those who've signed the accords and are on that side is taking Steve down. because he's not complying.
But Steve is so caught up in his own, my moral compass is so solid. He doesn't even take the time to try and explain. If they have the time to go pick up Ant-Man from, the US and get him to Germany, they have time to figure out a way to find a go-between. So maybe you get Clint, who's a solid non-biased person in this moment, before he goes and picks up Wanda and what of that. You say, Clint, here's information. Go to Tony. He will trust you. Let's sit down at the table and have him meet us at, where we need to go.
Yeah, and I think
And ultimately,
there was an opportunity
and ultimately
for that.
Tony.
There was an opportunity.
Ultimately, Tony. Yeah, and Cap took it away.
Yeah, because Tony was they were already taking rights away and freedom away from Wanda, which is exactly indicative of what Steve is worried about.
That argument drives me nuts, because it's not, oh, we're going to keep her locked in her room. No, that's not what's happening. It's, with any good organization, if you're having a PR disaster, you're not letting your people just go walk willy-nilly, do whatever they want. You're not going to, if you work for a baseball team and something happens with one of your players, you're going to go to your player and say, hey, right now we need you to lay low so that we can avoid another public incident. That is a very normal standard thing across business, government, anything. That's so standard. And Cap just takes it to the 11th degree. You're locking her in her room. No, he's not.
She's not allowed to leave the compound.
Because she's not a U.S. citizen. That is such a phenomenal argument. It drives me nuts when people don't pay attention to that. She is not a U.S. citizen. By every right, the U.S. would be able to say, nope, we're not going to let you back in our country. But that hasn't happened because she's an Avenger, because she gets special privileges. And in order for people to not look at her closer and maybe make that decision, yeah, maybe stay put. I think that's totally reasonable. And it's not like she's locked up. The individuals, yes, individual freedom, absolutely. But in a world like this, where individuals can happen upon great power, you have to have great responsibility.
Sure.
There has to be intentionality.
Yes.
Behind who, what, where uses their powers.
Right. But that is, I like what you're saying about power and responsibility, but that responsibility is personal self-responsibility. Spider-Man's not going to anyone else to tell him where to put his power. The responsibility is his own and his own choices.
Right. And then there's other people with those powers who choose to use their responsibility and their powers poorly.
Yeah.
Wanda
it's a case by
decides
case.
she gets to do whatever she wants.
It's a case-by-case basis.
And that she's going to go to other universes and kill people.
Yeah, and if someone does that, then they need to be stopped. But you can't do a blanket mandate.
But if you have the institution, if you have the accords put in place, you avoid those things from happening. As much as possible. They're probably still going to happen, and institutions aren't perfect, but you put safeguards in place. That is reasonable for any type of organization. Any protection organization has safeguards, has oversight like that.
Okay, so how about you give a closing couple lines, I'll give a closing couple lines, and then we'll move on.
Yes, because we've been talking for almost 25 minutes now.
We've been having this argument for a decade. Go for it.
Tony Stark's position is ultimately the more valid one because it recognizes this fundamental truth. Okay? Great power must answer to something beyond your moral compass, beyond your individual conscience. Cap's concerns about corruption and freedom are morally compelling, but his alternative to that relies too heavily on trusting those individuals to always make the right decision. And we've seen in the MCU, they regularly don't make the right decision. Tony's stance is not governments are always right. It is unchecked power is dangerous even when held by heroes. And this film gives intentionally to both sides, right? It gives legitimacy to Tony's argument and Cap's argument, but Tony's argument better addresses the long-term stability needed, the accountability needed, and the realities of human error in superpowered universe. End statement.
Nice. I think in this Marvel Cinematic Universe, which, you know, aside from superheroes, is very similar to our own by design, Tony may have like the stronger emotional argument in this moment in Civil War, where he feels like the best course of action is to give new levels of oversight for the Avengers because of recent mistakes that have been made. I still believe that Steve has a stronger moral and practical, like philosophical argument to be made based on past experience, based on future things that we, you know, it's proven by future things we see in the MCU, where if a greater level of oversight needs to happen, it shouldn't come from institutions and government institutions that are just as flawed as the individuals who make up the Avengers, if not more so flawed and corrupt and shifting agendas and the politics that are at play that can constantly shift and change. That's not the solution to what Tony is concerned about. End statement.
Okay. I'll get you someday.
I don't think you will.
I'll bring you around someday.
I think
will.
you're very hopeful and optimistic about how government is supposed to work, and you're right. There are ways it's supposed to work, and it's just the reality that it really doesn't, and people find ways to get around the systems and the guardrails for their own personal agendas. I wish it was different, but that's part of where the argument comes from.
Well, but that's why Discord needs to happen.
Discourse?
Not Discord.
Discord. Chaos.
Right, discourse. Yeah, chaos. Yes. No, but that's why discourse needs to happen. That's why continually you're updating the system and you're working to get better.
Yes,
Because if we ever get to a point where we think we figured it out, we have become complacent and we've missed the point.
100%.
Anyways, I think the core thing about this movie, there are two main points about this movie that we need to talk about as it relates to the larger MCU. The first one being that if Civil War hadn't taken place and the Avengers were all still together when Thanos came around the first time, I think there's a good chance they would have beaten him.
Mm-hmm.
If they were a unified front that strategically and
the odds of success would have massively improved.
If they had that unity, I think there was a good chance they would have been able to
the odds of success on the first go would have been way higher.
Right. And so that takes me to Doomsday, right? When we have a few different teams coming up.
Yeah.
And a couple different universes of different heroes. And it's like, okay, well, are the heroes going to be too busy fighting themselves to deal with, like, the main issue? you've talked about before about this being a potential Avengers versus X-Men movie.
I think to a degree. Like, I don't think that they're going to be at odds the entire time, but I could see like a first act situation. I could also see like if there's a team from one reality and there's a team from another reality, I think there's a high degree of possibility that those realities are going to collide in an incursion, and it's like it's us or them, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense.
And that also is another challenge from fully unifying and dealing with Doom. Then again, the Russo brothers really like to have their villains who are sympathetic in their goals. And so if we look at the like Secret Wars from 2015 in the comics, without Doom, everyone would have died. What Doom does is he saves
he saved what he could.
He saves what he could and creates a patchwork reality of all these different pieces of realities. But the trade-off is he makes himself God Emperor and Supreme Ruler.
Right.
Which is the problem. But like he saves everybody. So I'm going to be very interested to see how it all falls in Doomsday.
Well, and so that takes me to my second point, the comment you made about a sympathetic villain.
Mm-hmm.
So Tony in this movie, right? He's got for lack of a better analogy, or he is one of the antagonists in this movie, right?
Yeah.
Because this is Captain America: Civil War. And so the final fight isn't against Zemo; it's against Cap and Bucky versus Iron Man.
Yeah, I sent you a video. I sent you a video after our rewatch. It was the Russo brothers looking back 10 years on Civil War, and they specifically referred to Tony Stark as the villain of their movie, which I found to be pretty interesting because again, there's sympathy on both sides of the argument, and there's a level of understanding that can be made. But I love how they were saying in this video that like they talked to Robert Downey Jr. and they were like, if he had said no, like he didn't want to be the antagonist, they wouldn't have done the movie at all.
Yeah,
because there's no way you can do it.
So I mean, I bring that up because we have RDJ playing Doctor Doom.
Yeah,
there's a potential Tony connection.
Yeah,
and so if we're looking at movies where he's the villain, you got to look at Civil War. And what's interesting is that Tony's mom is a big driver of this movie for him
in Civil War.
And Doctor Doom and his mother in the comics, there's a lot that drives him from that relationship.
That's a good point. Yeah, Cynthia Von Doom.
And so we see at the end of a movie a pissed off Tony Stark.
Yeah.
Who's mad about his mom, and it's scary.
Yeah.
Right? When he locks in against Cap and Bucky, he almost takes him down, right? He gets very, very close.
I don't care. He killed my mom. Out. Yeah, it's great. It's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And so
because
when we look ahead at Doomsday, I mean, I can't help but notice parallels.
No, and for people who don't know, like everything that Victor Von Doom does in the comics, like his whole origin thing is like his mom sold her soul to Mephisto, which is basically like Lord of the Underworld in Marvel and stuff. He's been featured in Ironheart. Anyways, so she's trapped in basically hell. And that's what motivates Victor to learn everything he can about science, everything he can about magic. It's why he built a device, and Reed Richards tried to help him, and then it exploded and it scarred his face and made him mad at Reed. But like the driving force behind his entire like origins was trying to save his mother.
Yeah.
And another parallel.
So I mean,
Chris Evans is coming back.
Yep.
Golly, this movie's gonna be nuts.
So I mean, obviously we know it's gonna be nuts, otherwise we wouldn't be doing this podcast. But yeah, I think that when you look at Civil War, I think there's gonna be a lot that's similar in terms of our villains' motivations.
That could be really interesting, and even just as a baseline, it's gonna be RDJ
Tony
versus
trying
Evans.
to save what he can.
Yeah.
Tony trying to save what he can.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's do some news real quick. This has been a longer episode, so let's hit that real quick, and then we'll wrap up.
Yeah, I would say, off the top of my head, two big things. Spider Noir came out on Wednesday.
I'm an episode and a half in.
Okay. I watched the whole thing. It's incredibly awesome. It's very stylistic. It's very unique. Highly recommend. You can watch it in black and white, or you can watch it in color. Black and white is where the vibes are. 1930s New York, private eye. He's, Nick Cage has this great quote where his whole approach to Spider Noir has been like 70% Humphrey Bogart and then 30% Bugs Bunny, and that really translates well in this show.
Totally.
It's so good. It's a great watch. So that's definitely the first one. Spider Noir is great. I would love to see Sony do more projects. In the
saw something. Lamorne. He plays Robbie, right?
Yeah, Lamorne Morris.
Yeah, so he said that you should watch it in black and white first to really get like the old school vibes and like, the history of television and all that.
Yeah.
But then go back and watch it in color because then you'll appreciate the costuming and the choices that they make.
Yeah.
And you'll appreciate the art of film more.
Yeah, I'm planning to because it looks like it's like the color looks very good and they were very intentional with both versions. I'm definitely planning on rewatching it in color. The other thing, they dropped the teaser for X-Men 97 Season 2.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited.
That's going to premiere July 1st, I believe. And oh my gosh, it's...
If you haven't watched X-Men 97, you don't need to go watch the original show from the 90s, although, again,
unless you're a massive X-Men fan, but yeah.
But 97 was so good, beautifully animated. Story was incredible, made you care about every single character.
100%.
One of the big things about this new season I'm really excited for is that Nightcrawler continues to be like a main player.
Oh, he's so good.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, we get more Cyclops, and I'm always down for more Cyclops.
Yeah, and you've got
like
X-Men in the past, X-Men in the future. We got to get everyone back to the 90s because that's their present. It's so awesome.
So cool.
It's gonna be great.
So
yeah,
cool.
that's gonna be pretty fun. Did you catch Morph turning into Deadpool in the trailer?
I did.
Oh,
yeah.
that's awesome.
Which he's done before. That's
yeah,
not the
he
first
did it.
time
He
he's
did it
done
in the
that.
original series, and then we never actually saw like Deadpool himself. It was either Morph or it was like Xavier seeing flashes when he read Sabretooth's mind or something. But it'd be really cool because I know that they specifically weren't allowed to use Deadpool in the first season of 97, but maybe those restrictions are gone now. Who knows? Maybe we'll actually get the actual Deadpool. That'd be pretty cool. But
that's it for today. Next week we'll be watching Doctor Strange.
Yes.
Which I think has one of the most unique soundtracks of any of the MCU movies. I thought they did a good job with that one. But remember to go watch that before we come back, and we will see you next time.
Catch you later.
Thank you for listening to Super Rant Season 1 Doomsday Preppers. Look out for our following episode next Friday. And remember to watch the upcoming movie before listening. You can find a link to our watch schedule on our YouTube page.